joining us for the first time, let me tell you briefly about the American Antiquarian Society. We're a national research library and learned society of pre-20th century American history and culture. The Society conducts a variety of programs for a wide diversity of people to foster discussion and study about the time period of the AS collections. Our collections include some 4 million items from throughout what we now know as the United States, as well as portions of Canada and British West Indies. Included in our collections are items that have particular pertinence to tonight's talk. For instance, we have the Salisbury family papers that include all 3 generations of Stephens, starting with the one who first established the store and the mansion that's now behind the Coast Art Museum. It was this Stephen who, by 1774, had determined that he was truly on the side of the Whigs, or what we now call the patriots, and would store arms and ammunition to supply them in their rebellious activities. We also have the records of the American Political Society, a secret organization that sought to overthrow the political power of such Tory families as the Chandlers and the Paynes, and to control town meetings. The records of the American Political Society also detail their own amassing of gunpowder in preparation for outright rebellion. While we have extensive manuscripts, the vast majority of the Society's collections are printed materials, newspapers, pamphlets, books, graphic arts, materials, and all manner of ephemera. The greatest feature of our library is our early American imprints. We hold 2/3 of everything known to have been printed in this country before 1820, and this is the largest collection of such materials in the world. These early imprints are also an important element in tonight's program. Tonight's speaker is J.L. Bell, who is the author of The Road to Concord, How 4 Stolen Cannon Ignited the Revolutionary War, which we are selling here tonight, and Mr. Bell will sign your copies after his formal talk. J.L. Bell is also the author of a study of General George Washington's work in Cambridge and numerous articles. He maintains the Boston 1775.net website, which is endlessly interesting and offers daily doses of history, analysis, and unabashed gossip about the Revolutionary New England. Please welcome him to the stage.
Could not be here. When I first started to research Revolutionary New England, one of the first things I did was come out here to look at the newspapers they have on microfilm here. It is just a wonderful resource, and I'm delighted to be able to be on this side of the podium tonight. I'm going to start this presentation called The Arms Race of 1774 by reading a passage from the journal of Reverend Ezra Stiles of Newport, Rhode Island. He recorded the experience of a young Irish merchant named McNeil who had just traveled on business east through Massachusetts to Boston, and described what he experienced in the town of Shrewsbury. He went to bed without hearing anything, but about midnight, or perhaps 1 o'clock, he was suddenly waked up. Somebody violently rapping up the landlord, telling the doleful story that the powder was taken, 6 men killed, and all the people there, between there and Boston, arming and marching down to the relief of their brethren at Boston. And within a quarter or half an hour, he judges 50 men were collected at the tavern, though now deep in night, equipping themselves and sending off posts every way to the neighboring towns. The men set off as fast as they were equipped. In the morning, Mr. McNeil rode forward and passed through the whole the very time of the convulsion. He said he never saw such a scene before. All along were armed men, rushing forward, some on foot, some on horseback. At every house, women and children making cartridges, running bullets, baking wallets, baking biscuits, crying and bemoaning, and at the same time animating their husbands and sons to fight for their liberties, though not knowing whether they would ever see them again. All this and activity corresponding with such emotions appeared all along the whole tract of 40 miles from Shrewsbury to Boston. That scene should sound familiar, almost iconic. It's how the American culture remembers the alarm during the Battle of Lexington and Concord of April 19th, 1775. And that was the subject of innumerable 19th century prints like this one. But Mr. McNeil was describing his experience on September 2nd, 1774. He witnessed an armed uprising in central Massachusetts against the royal government of Great Britain more than 7 months before the Revolutionary War actually began. This talk is about what prompted that uprising and what followed, which is what I call an arms race, and how that led to war. To start, let's go back to look at Massachusetts' Constitution. Originally, Massachusetts' legislature elected the colony's governor, but that changed in 1692 after the Glorious Revolution in Britain. Then the government in London, guided by Parliament, appointed the governors. Most other British colonies in America worked that way, only in Connecticut and Rhode Island were the governors still elected. So that meant there was a top-down authority extending from Parliament and the King in every colony. Meanwhile, there's also a bottom-up or middle-up authority of the white men of property, pushing back against the royal authority. The top-down powers exercised by the Crown included appointing the governor, the lieutenant governor, the judges, and other local officials. The Crown controlled the military and the customs service. But the bottom-up powers were stemmed from the town meetings in every town, where men elected their selectmen and the town officials and the representatives in the Massachusetts General Court. And each year's outgoing General Court elected the upper house of the legislature, called the Council. So ultimately, both the House and the Council got their authority from below. They were bottom-up institutions. And there were areas where top-down and bottom-up authority came into conflict. For instance, the governor could veto bills. The Privy Council in London could veto bills that the legislature passed, and there was no way to override a veto. The militia was a very vitally important institution in colonial America, and in the middle of this dynamic, because it was both bottom-up and top-down. It was the local emergency militia, military force, distinct from the regular military controlled by the Crown. And as such, it embodied self-defense and self-governance. Militia service was required for all white men between the ages of 16 and 60. Companies elected their own officers up to the rank of captain. So it was an avenue for proving yourself as a man of worth in your community, that you would get your neighbors to elect you first as sergeant and then as a lieutenant and then as a captain. The governor was in charge. He was the official commander of the militia, man appointed by the Crown. And he tended to, the governor tended to name the generals and the colonels. But in the middle there, the top-down authority and the bottom-up authority met, and there were some conflicts. Furthermore, when the militia didn't want to turn out, there was no way the governor could make it turn out. There were moments in 1747 and then 1765 where there were riots in Boston, and the governor goes to his main advisors and says, we have to call out the militia to stop the rioters. And the advisors say, you see the rioters? That's the militia. Those are the men we want. Around 1765, London tried to strengthen its power, get more top-down power over Massachusetts. It granted, in 1767, it granted salaries to its top officials, its appointees, which meant that they were insulated from the bottom-up authority that no longer had to vote on their salaries. The Crown beefed up the customs service with 5 appointed commissioners who were supposed to collect these new taxes, the townsend duties. And then after the Boston Tea Party of December 1773, the imperial government really cracked down on Massachusetts with what they called the coercive acts. The man in charge of implementing those harsh new laws was General Thomas Gage, the commander-in-chief of the British Army in North America. He had lived in America for decades. He had married an American woman, and in 1774 he promised King George personally that he would be able to carry out these new laws in Massachusetts. He came to Massachusetts, came to Boston in May 1774, bringing Army regiments back into the town to keep the port closed and to keep the town peaceful. He summoned the legislature, the Massachusetts General Court, to meet in Salem instead of Boston as a way further to punish and isolate the town of Boston. Parliament then passed something called the Massachusetts Government Act, which even further limited Massachusetts' powers of bottom-up self-government. It used to be that town meetings could be held at any time. Well, now there was only one town meeting allowed per year, and anything else had to be approved by the governor in advance. In 1768, there had been a convention of all the towns in Boston to protest the new taxes, and didn't do much, but this new law made sure that that was not allowed anymore. No more province-wide conventions. And most directly, the councilors, the man at the upper house of the legislature, they are now all going to be appointed in London to be loyal to the crown instead of elected here in Massachusetts. And the result, because they were appointed by writ of mandamus, it was called the Mandamus Council or the Newfangled Council. The Massachusetts Government Act arrived in August. General Gage started to swear in those new councilors in Salem. The people of Massachusetts didn't like it. In their eyes, the crown had now encroached on every area of popular government, and so they started to rise up. The legislators sent men to the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia just before the governor dissolved the legislature. Town meetings kept going by adjournment. They said, oh no, we're not having a new meeting that needs approval. We're just adjourned from our last meeting. The Massachusetts, as I said, the new law had said you can't have town meetings without the governor's approval, you can't have province-wide meetings. Well, the new law didn't say anything about county meetings. So they started having county conventions, starting in July 1774 in Berkshire County out to the west. Then in August 6th, there was a Worcester County Convention at Mary Stern's Tavern here in town. And at the end of August, a Hampshire County Convention, covering the whole Connecticut River Valley. We don't know much about the Berkshire and Hampshire County meetings, because the notes, if they took them, do not survive, but we know a whole lot about what was going on in Worcester County, because they really kept good notes, and the notes are in this building. Worcester County issued a formal protest against the Massachusetts Government Act in August 1774. And then came the court days when the courts were supposed to meet in each county to decide lawsuits and to look at petty crimes. Out in Berkshire County, the court was due to meet in Great Barrington on August 16th, and instead, hundreds of unarmed militiamen came out and massed around the courthouse and insisted that the judges and magistrates, justices of the peace, not meet. Again, we don't have a lot of recollections about this, descriptions or sources, and you can see from the design of this monument to this that it's a relatively recent monument, so they didn't even get around to commemorating this until relatively recently. But the same thing happened in Hampshire County on August 30th. The same sorts of crowds were intimidating councilors out in the western part of Massachusetts into resigning or promising not to take their seats on the newfangled council. Gage was even having trouble in Salem, where on August 25th the town met to choose delegates for the Essex County Convention. He tried to stop that meeting, he tried to arrest leaders, and he failed, and finally he decided to go back to Boston and move his government back to Boston. So Gage clearly saw that he needed to take control of the situation to reestablish the top-down royal authority. He decided to minimize the threat posed by this site, the provincial powerhouse in Charlestown, in an area that's now Somerville. It held gunpowder owned by the province and the town militia companies. A general of the militia told Gage that the towns had already removed all their gunpowder, so there was already a lot of gunpowder out in the countryside. The rest belonged to the province, so it was under Gage's authority, and he decided to take possession of that gunpowder before it disappeared. The general wrote out orders for mission on September 1st. Before dawn, 280 soldiers marched from Boston Common to the Long Wharf. Between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning, they clambered into boats, and then they were rowed up around Boston to the Mystic River. They landed at a dock on a loyalist's farm, and they marched overland to this powerhouse, arriving just before dawn. They waited for dawn because you don't want to take a lantern into a gunpowder storage house. And then they went in and they removed 250 half barrels of powder onto 8 wagons. At the same time, 20 soldiers proceeded on into Cambridge, where they met the sheriff of Middlesex County, and he turned over 2 cannon that belonged to the county artillery militia. Some locals tried to stop them, but they couldn't get organized. So the soldiers moved all that ordnance out to Castle William, a fortified island in Boston Harbor. It was all that gunpowder and those 2 cannons were under the Army's controls, beyond the reach of any locals. This operation took fewer than 300 soldiers. It went smoothly. It met very little resistance. It was over by midday. General Gage felt so confident of the new situation that he announced that Massachusetts was now welcome to elect legislators for a new general court. He was going to let the legislature meet again in Salem. Well, that wasn't what the people were interested in. For the people, the removal of the gunpowder and the cannon looks like a strike at their militia. One more branch of their traditional self-government being encroached on. And furthermore, the rumors about what had happened in Cambridge on the September 1st were even worse than the reality. In Hartford, people heard at Cambridge a high Tory had petitioned Gage for troops to protect him at his house, which Gage granted. A mob gathered and demanded of the militia general to renounce his Toryism or whatever he might term it, but after a short parley, the troop fired, killed some right out, a large number wounded. And by the time the alarm reached the Longmeadow, Massachusetts, the story was that the troops in the harbor of Boston and the army on the land side were also firing upon the town, and it was like the town was demolished. And those types of rumors were also what Mr. McNeil heard in Shrewsbury soon after midnight on September 2nd, which is why all the men were alarmed and marching towards the eastern part of Massachusetts. Men gathered in their militia companies, got their guns, and headed off to the source of the trouble. Boston merchant John Andrews later wrote, they had an account at Marlborough of the towners being removed last Thursday night, yet they were down to Cambridge, which is 30 miles, by 8 o'clock Friday morning with a troop of horse and another on foot. And the radical Boston Gazette spun the story this way. From these several hostile appearances, the county of Middlesex took the alarm, and on Thursday evening the first began to collect in large bodies with their arms, provisions, and ammunition, determined by some means to give a check to a power which so openly threatened their destruction, and in such a clandestine manner robbed them of the means of their defense. By 8 o'clock, according to John Andrews, there were about 3,000 men under their regular leaders at Cambridge Common, and continually increasing. Under their regular leaders meant the militia officers, so these men were turning out as if it were a military emergency. Of course, they had learned as they got closer to Cambridge and were not seeing billows of smoke in the air that Boston had not been burned. It was not under fire from artillery, and there was no shooting, and there had been no killing, and so on. But they kept coming anyway, determined to make a point. They advanced to Cambridge armed only with sticks, said the Boston Gazette, as they had left their firearms, etc., at some distance behind them. The towns in the western part of the state, the province, had intimidated many of the newfangled councilors into not taking their seats, and the crowd that was gathering in Cambridge now determined to do the same. They sent for the 2 councilors who lived in Cambridge, and they told them that they had to meet them on the common and resign. This is a map of the common that's drawn by a Harvard student in the 1780s. The Cambridge Committee of Correspondence was worried about violence, worried about possible retaliation from General Gage and the troops in Boston. So they sat down with the leaders of the new arrivals and with the 2 councilors, and they worked out a deal. The men resigned in writing, and they went to the common, and they spoke to the crowd and said they were very sorry that they ever even considered becoming part of the newfangled council. There was even some help coming from Boston. Dr. Joseph Warren reported later to Samuel Adams, who was at Philadelphia. A billet was brought requesting me to take some step in order to prevent the people from coming to immediate acts of violence, as incredible numbers were in arms and lined the roads from Sudbury to Cambridge. And half a dozen Boston activists set out across the ferry to get to Cambridge. On our way, said Warren, we met Lieutenant Governor Thomas Oliver. He said he was going to the general, Gage, to desire him not to march his troops out of Boston. We thought his precaution good and proceeded to Cambridge. Lieutenant Governor Oliver of Cambridge had made a deal with the leaders of the crowd. He would go into Boston. He would convince General Gage, no, don't respond with military force to what's going on. Then he would come back out, and they would, in return, the crowd would remain peaceful. All these upper-class gentlemen, the leaders, the political leaders of Cambridge and of Charlestown and of Boston, and the crown political leaders like Thomas Oliver, were all trying to keep the crowd calm, not rile them up. The Boston Whigs had spent years now trying to get the bulk of the Massachusetts population excited about their issues in Boston, most of them having to do with trade. And now, those same men were trying to get the people of rural Massachusetts to calm down a bit. By the time the Boston Whig leaders arrived at the Common, the councilors were resigning. But the Bostonians had to take charge, so they went up front and they started to treat the gathering like a town meeting. The Boston Gazette said a vote was called for to see if the body was dissatisfied with the declarations and resignations, and passed in the affirmative, nem com, which means without dissent. It was then moved to know whether that body would signify their abhorrence of mobs, riots, and destructions of private property. And that passed in the affirmative, nem com. So like 5,000 men with sticks, we're totally against the local violence. The committee sat down in a tavern beside the Common with the militia officers in the crowd. And they had to figure out what to do with the sheriff of Middlesex County who had turned over those cannon and had also passed out writs under the Massachusetts Government Act. Another question was Lieutenant Governor Thomas Oliver. He had just come back. Well, did he have to resign from the council as well? Oliver chided them. He said he had a deal this morning. This was not part of the deal. So the leaders decided, okay, well, all right, we'll let you go back home. We'll try to sell this to the crowd. Or the Boston Gazette said, that seemed satisfactory to the committee, and they were preparing to deliver it to the body, the thousands of men. But then something happened to inflame the heat. 3 customs commissioners, those men who were in charge of collecting all the new taxes, they happened to ride by Cambridge Common on their way from Salem to Boston. And Isaiah Thomas, the young printer of the Massachusetts Spy, pointed out the least popular of the customs commissioners as he rode by in his carriage. In fact, that customs commissioner later reported, no insult or affront was offered to me until I came to where some people from Boston stood, who called out to me, damn you, how do you like us now, you Tory son of a bitch? And the sight of that obnoxious person, the customs commissioner, so inflamed the people, the Boston Gazette said, that in a few minutes about 160 horsemen were drawn up and proceeding in pursuit of him on the full gallop. Some of the committee men had to stop most of the men on the horseback to come back, calm it down. But a few men continued to chase the commissioner. They chased him across the bridge from Cambridge through Roxbury all the way to the gates of Boston, which were guarded by British troops. Meanwhile, back on Cambridge Common, everybody was riled up, and a rumor went around that now General Gage was going to send troops out. So the crowd sent light horsemen, according to the newspaper, to scout the roads. Now note that light horseman is a military term. People were starting to think in military ways. The riders came back with news and no, there were no troops coming. But nevertheless, the crowd was all fired up now, and they decided that regardless of what their leaders had agreed to, they were going to get Lieutenant Governor Thomas Oliver to resign. The crowd replaced their first leaders in the middle of this crisis with more confrontational men, and they marched out to Lieutenant Governor Thomas Oliver's house late in the afternoon, catching him just as he was preparing to go back into Boston. Hundreds of men surrounded his house, some of them now holding their guns. Oliver refused to cooperate. Soon the men were coming closer, looking in through the open window. Oliver could hear his wife and his daughters and his servants crying outside the house. All the leaders were pleading with Oliver to give in, to resign. And finally, after about an hour, he took the resignation that they had written out for him and wrote at the bottom, my house at Cambridge being surrounded by about 4,000 people in compliance with their command, I sign my name, Thomas Oliver. Meanwhile, there were other rumors spreading inside Boston. According to John Andrews, 4 or 5 expresses have come down to Charlestown and here to acquaint us that between Sudbury and this, above 10,000 men are in arms and are continually coming down from the country back. That their determination is to collect 30 or 40 or 50,000 by night, which they are sure of accomplishing, and which they intend to fling in about 15,000 by way of the neck, and as many more over the ferry, and when they've got position, to come in like locusts and rid the town of every soldier. The people in Boston were afraid that they were going to now be swarmed over by angry militiamen. Only one force was strong enough to disperse that crowd out in Cambridge: the weather. According to can jump Tudor's diary at 5 p.m. came on a hard thunder and lightning with a great shower, and the thousands of men headed home. But that confrontation on September 2nd made clear that it wasn't, this crisis in Massachusetts wasn't just a matter of riotous Bostonians on that one peninsula anymore. Gage told his boss, Secretary of State Lord Dartmouth, on September 2nd, that while I saw things were bad when I rode from Salem, I found them much worse than I expected when I arrived here in Boston. Though the people are not held up in high estimation by the troops, yet they are numerous, worked up to a fury. They are not a Boston rabble, but the freeholders and farmers of the country. For years, royal appointees had believed that a small faction of Boston malcontents were riling up everybody else in town and everybody else in the whole province. But now they realized that many more people in Massachusetts were angry, or at least Gage realized this. And in fact, the rural population of Massachusetts had become more radical than Boston. They were no longer respecting the traditional authority of the king's appointees, and they were not really so hot about respecting the traditional authority of the gentlemen in their communities. The authority of the royal government now stopped at the gates of Boston. General Gage had troops in Boston and at Castle William in the harbor. He had no power to compel obedience to the king's laws anywhere else in Massachusetts. In fact, all of New England was no longer inclined to respect his authority. The rural population, which is 90% of the population, had adopted the idea that it was absolutely necessary to resist the Massachusetts Government Act and to keep pushing back until Parliament pulled it back. And when men massed in their militia companies, they were responding the way the militia had been trained to respond to in an emergency. You don't just wait for clear orders from above. You get your guns, you get together with your neighbors, and you march to where the trouble is. This was how they were mobilizing. They were trained to mobilize for self-defense, and they were seeing the Massachusetts Government Act as a threat to their society. In fact, rural militias were still mobilizing 3 days after the power alarm because it took a while for the corrective messages, oh no, Boston is not in flames, to catch up. So Dr. Warren wrote to Samuel Adams, the people from Hampshire County crowded this county of Worcester with armed men, and both counties received the account of the quiet dissipation of the people of Middlesex with apparent regret, grudging them the glory of having done something important for their country without their assistance. In Pomfret, Connecticut, Israel Putnam heard about the Royal Artillery shelling Boston at about 11 a.m. on Saturday, and he sent off letters to his counterparts in the county's militia. Handbills repeating Putnam's alert arrived in New Haven on Sunday. By Monday, September 5th, their word of the trouble reached New York, and the commander of the British troops there sent a letter to General Gage asking if he needed help. And on Tuesday, the Continental Congress in Philadelphia received their first intimation of the bombardment of Boston, as John Adams wrote. Probably 20,000 New England militiamen mobilized that day, or the day on September 2nd, or the days that followed, however briefly. That was more people than General Washington ever had in his army during the siege of Boston. That afternoon, inside Boston, General Gage canceled those elections that he had called the day before. Not that any towns paid attention to that, which I'll get to later. He also responded by increasing the defense of Boston. The Royal Navy moved men of war around the town. He stationed cannon out on the neck, the narrow band of land that connected Boston to the rest of Massachusetts. He started to fortify the gate there until it was a large stone and brick fortification. He was defending himself against the people he was supposed to govern. On this September 4th, Gage summoned the 10th and 52nd Regiments to Boston from Quebec. On September 5th, he summoned all the troops he had in New York up to Boston. Meanwhile, out in Worcester, there was supposed to be a court session on September 6th. It didn't happen. The Worcester County Convention had already requested that the judges not meet under the Massachusetts Government Act. Militia companies from 37 towns turned out to support that request. An observer counted 4,722 men in all. In 1765, to compare, Worcester had fewer than 400 adult men in its population. So 10 times the population of Worcester crowded into the town. They lined Main Street. They demanded that every royal appointee promise not to act under the new laws. At one point, the organizers in Worcester were afraid that troops would come out and try to stop them. But this court closing confirmed what I said before. General Gage simply did not have the force to do that he no longer was able to enforce the laws if the people did not want the laws. Underneath these public political protests, these open resistance, there was also military preparations that people were keeping pretty secret. That started even on the afternoon of September 2nd, the day of the alarm in Cambridge, when towns like Brookline held meetings to discuss their military supplies and training. Men wanted to be able to defend themselves in case the royal troops were used against them, or at least to show that they could defend themselves so as to make the royal government back down. But of course, to General Gage, those preparations looked like a threat. He warned Lord Dartmouth, his boss, on September 12th, the country people are exercising in arms in this province, Connecticut and Rhode Island, and getting magazines of arms and ammunitions in the country and such artillery as they can procure, good and bad. By artillery, Gage meant cannon, which was the most advanced battlefield weapon of the time. Massachusetts' militia companies had a few small cannon that they trained on, those including the two that Gage had taken back from Cambridge on September 1st. But most of the cannon in Massachusetts were along the coast, in shore batteries, or belonging to merchants who needed to arm their ships during wartime. So if you wanted a cannon, you had to look along the East Coast. The battery in Charlestown, north of Boston, contained 5 cannon, 18-pounders, meaning they could shoot a cannonball that weighed 18 pounds. Pretty big. On September 7th, the people had hauled all those cannon away. They were reported to be hidden on the town's schoolhouse hill under what in 1845 historian termed stable dirt. The people in Dorchester, south of Boston, followed Charlestown's example. On September 12th, Samuel Pierce of Dorchester recorded in his diary, the great gun was removed from Preston's Point at the mouth of the Neponset River. Boston had 2 batteries at the north and south ends of the Central Harbor. In 1770, those fortifications contained 22 guns between them. The Royal Artillery was already using the south battery, but the north battery was still staffed by a local militia company. So it was not in control of the royal government. On the night of Wednesday, September 14th, sailors from the Royal Navy entered the north battery from the water and spiked all the guns inside. In addition, the Boston Post reported that the cannons in the batteries back of Governor's Island in Boston Harbor were removed by the general's order. So by crippling those 2 batteries, the King's military was keeping the shipping channel and the mouth of the Charles River safe for the Royal Navy's warships. But that wasn't all that happened that night. Boston also had 2 small gun houses or armories near the center of town. This is a builder's sketch of one of them. It was about the size, I think, of a small 2-car garage. Each gun house had 2 small cannon inside on carriages built for battlefield use. So these carriages were more useful during a land war than the carriages which were in the batteries and on ships. The man in charge of the company leaned toward the crowd, but most of the officers and the enlisted men leaned towards the Whigs or patriots. General Gage didn't want to lose control of the 4 field pieces in those gun houses, so he ordered a double guard to the new and old gun houses. But on the morning of September 15th, that's the same morning after the cannon were removed by the Navy, the troops found there was an opening in the side of the old gun house, and the 2 small brass cannon inside were missing. Naturally, Gage put an even stronger guard in front of the new gun house, which frankly already seemed very secure because it was right next to the common where the 4th Regiment of His Majesty's Army was camped. The commander of the train of the militia company had the only key, but even that situation didn't seem secure enough, so Gage had his Royal Artillery officers go and ask for the gun house key. They went to the gun house on Friday, September 16th, to get the cannon out and move them into the British camp. And when they opened the gun house, those guns were gone as well. All 4 of the Boston train's brass cannon had disappeared. There were other conflicts over cannon inside of Boston in September 1774. By the end of the month, there was this big confrontation over the inventory of a hardware merchant named Joseph Scott. The Royal Artillery enforced a sale and carted away all his ordnance. And Scott went into hiding from the mob because people were climbing up to his window and emptying buckets from the outhouses into the That night, Dr. Joseph Warren went to General Gage to complain, what is the meaning that the general buys military stores? And Gage reportedly replied, the country people are all armed and collecting cannon and military stores from all quarters, which could indicate nothing but their intention of attacking His Majesty's forces in that town. It is notorious that many cannon have been conveyed from thence, and arms are carried out openly, like every man that goes out of Boston without molestation. General Gage tried to alert his superiors in London about this dangerous situation. On September 25th, he wrote to the Secretary of War, Viscount Barrington, the New England provinces, except part of New Hampshire, are, I may say, in arms, and the question is not now whether you shall quell disturbances in Boston, but whether those provinces shall be conquered. From appearances, no people are more determined for a civil war, the whole country, from hence to New York, armed, training, and providing military stores. But General Gage never told his superiors of how Bostonians had managed to sneak 4 brass cannon out from under his own nose. That news probably wouldn't have helped his standing in London. As it worked out, the minister already thought he was overreacting, so they didn't send any help. The people of Massachusetts went ahead with the elections that Gage had called off. The new Massachusetts General Court met in Salem in early October, waited for Gage. He never showed up, so they decided to turn themselves into a new shadow government, the Massachusetts Provincial Congress. This was expressly what the Massachusetts Government Act said was illegal. That group met first in Salem, then returned to Concord beyond General Gage's reach. More people, more towns sent delegates to that Congress than sent representatives to a regular general court. That was how fervent, how strong the feeling that this was the right thing to do was. Soon that Congress was assuming the powers of government, of taxation, of military preparation. It reorganized the militia by purging loyalist officers, and it stepped up military training. On October 25th, a Congress committee drew up a military budget that called for 20 field pieces, 20 cannon, and 4 mortars. The Congress formed a committee of safety and a committee of supplies, who together voted to start collecting cannon out in the countryside in November. So this was about 2 months after the people of Massachusetts themselves had started to grab cannon wherever they lived. But now the political leaders, the organized group at the top, started to take control of this process. In December, what I call his arms race to control artillery spread outside Massachusetts. The Rhode Island Assembly voted to remove almost all the guns from Fort George off Newport. 5 days later, the people of New London, Connecticut moved their cannon up into the country. People began to wonder about the situation in New Hampshire, where Fort William and Mary guarded Portsmouth Harbor. Bostonians saw signs that the Royal Navy was about to send a ship north, perhaps to secure that place. So Paul Revere rode 60 miles of icy roads to warn the New Hampshire militia. Militiamen stormed Fort William and Mary, overwhelming the captain and his 6 soldiers inside. They seized most of the gunpowder in the storehouse, took it off the island, leaving the island pretty much defenseless. Then 2 days later, New Hampshire political leaders went back to the fort and took away all the cannons. General Gage realized that the Crown had now lost control of New England. The other governors were powerless, or they were on the Patriots' side. The London government wasn't going to send them any help. But to his credit, General Gage didn't give up. He started an effort to infiltrate the Patriot movement in Massachusetts. On February 21st, the Committee of Safety and Supplies met in Charlestown. They decided they now had collected enough cannon to start organizing artillery companies out in the countryside. And on that same day, February 21st, General Gage was able to write in his files in Boston, there are in the country 38 field pieces and 19 companies of artillery. General Gage had made a deal for information with a new member of those committees, Dr. Benjamin Church, Jr. of Boston. We don't have an authentic picture of Church, so I'm showing you a bit of a ciphered letter that he sent to a British Army officer later in 1775. Church was at nearly the highest level of the Whig organizers in Boston. But now he was sharing information with the enemy. Thanks to Church, Gage knew where most of the provincial Congress's guns were, and they were in Worcester. There were also a few at Watertown, a few at Concord, and some in Salem, including, quote, pieces of brass cannon. And Gage was looking for brass cannon, the brass cannon that had been stolen from Boston. So he sat down with his new information and made new plans. Back in January, Gage had asked military army officers who were capable of taking sketches of a country to contact his office. On February 22nd, the day after receiving his first intelligence from Dr. Church, the general wrote down instructions for two of the officers who had come forward at that request, Captain William Brown of the 52nd Regiment and Ensign Henry de Vernier of the 10th. They were to hike out into the Massachusetts countryside in civilian clothing as far as Worcester County, taking notes on roads, towns, passes, fords, and other geographic features. Gage told the officers that he expected to have occasion to march troops through the country the ensuing spring. The two officers left Boston on February 23rd with an enlisted man as servant. By midday, they had got as far as Watertown. During their midday dinner there, a black woman told Brown and de Vernier that she recognized them as officers of the Army. The spies' cover was completely blown, but they understood that it was absolutely necessary to push on to Worcester. So they continued west. Meanwhile, General Gage had received more information from Dr. Church. The physician relayed there are 5 field pieces in an old store or barn near the landing place at Salem. They are to be removed in a few days. The seizure of them would greatly disconcert their schemes. Were those the guns that had been stolen out of the Boston gun house? Well, if they were, Gage had to act quickly before they were moved. So he ordered an expedition to Salem. Late on Saturday, February 25th, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Leslie and 240 men from Castle William went on a ship in Boston Harbor. They sailed up to Marblehead. They arrived early on Sunday morning. The soldiers stayed below decks until most of the town people went into their meetings. Then the troops disembarked and started to march quickly towards Salem. Now, in fact, a painter in Salem named David Mason was working for the Committee of Safety. He had collected about 12.5 old iron cannon, and a blacksmith was mounting them on carriages in a shop in the north of town across the North River. Mason heard that the British soldiers were on their way. He raced out of his meeting house to the blacksmith shop. The men started to remove the cannon farther up, about a mile further into the woods, and they pulled up the drawbridge over the river. Lieutenant Colonel Leslie and his men arrived, guided by local loyalists. They could see the smithy they were supposed to march to, but they couldn't get across the river. There was yelling, there was shoving, there was bayonet pricking. Militia companies were gathered from nearby towns. After nearly 90 minutes, with the sun going down, the minister of a nearby Anglican church worked out a compromise. Mason, knowing that most of his cannon were now safe, would let down the bridge. Leslie pledged his honor he would not march above 30 yards beyond it and then immediately return without making a search. And that's what happened. The 64th Regiment walked across the bridge, came back, headed back to their ship. The militia companies followed them. There were no shots. The war did not start. On March 3rd, a week later, the local Essex Gazette reported 27 pieces of cannon were removed out of this town in order to be out of the way of robbers. Meanwhile, Captain Brown and Ensign de Vernier were out in Worcester. They were, that same Sunday, you were not able to travel from one town to another on Sunday in New England because of Sabbath laws. So they were in their tavern, sketching out maps of the roads that they had been on, taking notes of what they had seen, including cannon in the town of Worcester. And that evening, 2 men came to their tavern keeper and said they knew that these strangers were officers of the Army. So, early the next morning, Brown and de Vernier left Worcester. And on their way out, they were escorted by a man on horseback who rode beside them. According to an 1827 local history, this was Timothy Bigelow, the leader of the American Political Society, leader of the Worcester Resistance. Bigelow seems to have alerted patriots in Marlborough, the officers next stop, so the officers could only stay with their contact there for 20 minutes before he asked them politely to leave, and then trudged back to Boston through a snowstorm. Around this time, however, Gage developed another intelligence source out in the Massachusetts countryside. This person lived in Concord, communicated by letter. He or she wrote most of those letters to Gage in terrible French, probably as a way to make sure that people who might have intercepted the letters, most people would not be able to read that information. And the spy on March 8th said, among other things, that 4 brass cannon and 2 cohorts, or mortars, so-called by the peasantry, concealed that Mr. B, lately chosen minute colonel, supposed to be deposited in his cellar. Those 4 brass cannon were the guns from Boston. The Patriots had smuggled them out of town, hidden them for a while at a tavern in Dorchester, and then moved them out to Concord. Gage's spy also reported other iron cannon around the Concord courthouse, and more just arrived from another town. The man in charge of those guns was Mr. B, lately chose or appointed minute colonel. That was James Barrett, a 65-year-old former and provincial Congress delegate. This is his house. Barrett also kept an inventory, an account of the military stores that he was collecting in Concord for the Massachusetts Provincial Congress. That piece of paper is now here at the American Antiquarian Society, and it exactly matches what the spy's information was. 4 brass cannon, 10 iron cannon, 2 mortars. Barrett had neighbors storing other supplies for the Committee of Safety. Musket cartridges, musket balls, flints, gunpowder, entrenching tools, medical chests, tents, tent poles, dishes, spoons, and 4 barrels of oatmeal containing 20 bushels. He was starting to equip an army. On March 11th, that same spy from Concord reported to Gage on a trip to Worcester. He, or she, saw cannon here outside the church, mounted poorly on carriages. But that report ended. The brass cannon veritably now are at Concord. And it was the brass cannon that Gage had the most reason to want to get back. He ordered Captain Brown and Ensign DeVerdier to go back out into the countryside. They hiked to Concord in disguise on March 20th, and they confirmed the same information as the local spy. Their iron cannon they kept in a house in town. Their brass they had concealed in some place behind the town in a wood. On April 14th, General Gage received new orders from London, written January 27th. Lord Dartmouth now didn't merely authorize military action against the rebellion, he ordered the general to act. And the order specified that the first and essential step would be to arrest the principal actors and abettors in the provincial Congress. But Gage didn't move to arrest anyone. He wasn't tracking John Hancock or Samuel Adams or any of the members of the Committee of Safety. His intelligence file and his orders show he's completely focused on the cannon, and now he's completely focused on Concord. Why not Worcester, where the Congress had more weapons and more supplies? Well, it was farther away. It was thus harder to send troops to. Gage didn't have a source inside that town, as far as we can tell, and I argue that the stolen brass cannon were what was most important to him on a personal level, because if he could get those back, he might be able to erase the embarrassment of having let them get away from him in the first place. And again, in mid-April, the Concord spy confirmed for Gage that the brass cannon were out here in Concord at Barrett's farm. Seizing those field pieces would require a march deep into hostile territory, 17 miles to Concord, another 2 miles across the North Bridge to Barrett's farm. But that could erase the embarrassment. General Gage drafted orders for Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith, and at the top of his first draft of orders, he wanted the regulars to look for 4 brass cannon and 2 mortars or cohorns in the cellar or outhouses of Mr. Barrett, a little the other side of the bridge. However, the Barretts had already started moving the supplies on their farm to neighboring towns. Colonel Barrett's grandson, James, then 14 years old, recalls later how he and other boys, with oxen and cart, removed the stores deposited at the house of his grandfather into the woods and concealed them, a cartload in a place under pine boughs. To speed the movement, the grandson said in 1848, the lad would march on each side of the oxen and goad them into a trot. So you'd go into Concord, west of Concord this time, and you'd see these teenagers poking their oxen to go faster and faster with these ox carts behind them. Gage took steps to try to stop the Patriots from sending out alarm messengers. He had mounted officers ride out on April 18th to patrol the roads between Charlestown and Concord. Ironically, those riders, seeing those officers come through, alerted the same people they were trying not to alert. So in Lexington, militiamen saw those officers and they started to gather. After sunset on April 18th, about 800 British soldiers were rowed quietly across the Charles River. That was more than twice as many as went to Charlestown in September 1774, twice as many as went to Salem in February. But those 800 men would get to Concord too late to catch Massachusetts' Concord at Canada. And on the road to Concord, those British soldiers would come across the Lexington Militia Company on alert because the riders lined up on their common. There would be shooting, and this time those shots would be fatal. And by the end of the afternoon, the Massachusetts militia regiments had risen up again and were converging on Boston, and the war began. And that is why I say that 4 stolen cannon ignited the Revolutionary War. Thank you. I want to also mention that of the 4 brass cannon that were out at Barracks Farm in early April 1775, 2 of them still survived. In the 1780s, Secretary of War Henry Knox had those guns engraved with the names of Adams and Hancock, or 2 other people, 2 other things that got away from General Gage, supposedly. And at that point, they became very easy to track because they were unique. They had these engravings. Today, the Hancock is on display at the Concord Visitor Center of Minuteman National Historical Park. You can see it there. The Adams was mounted for many years like this, for over a century and a half, in the chamber on the top of the Bunker Hill Monument. The National Park Service has just conserved it, and it is now in a more climate-controlled display case in the lodge at the bottom of the Bunker Hill Monument, so you can see visit the Adams as well. Thank you again.